Please welcome Mr. Janaka Peiris, a senior technical lead at Creative Software, with close to 20 years of experience in the software engineering industry. He has worked in various business verticals from ERP to e-healthcare in positions ranging from software engineer to team lead. He's an alumni of the University of California. Big welcome to you, sir, and over to you.
Yes, thank you, Iruka. Let me share my screen. Yes, so this session is about developing your own venture. And I'll be also touching some topics on some of the questions that you had been asking during the past session as well. So let me proceed with this. So a little bit of myself, and what I want to highlight is the industries that you also will work throughout your career will change, not only the technologies. So it is very important to know how businesses work and how you give solutions, which is the basic way which is you are going to apply if you are to create your own venture. So that's the reason why I included the industries that I have worked with. And most of them are part of the ERP solutions that I have worked. And even though the domains change, the way that you give solutions and they don't change. And it is a challenging thing to understand how different businesses work together. And that is the key thing you'll have to take from this one. So the agenda would be basically 40 minutes of my talk followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. So please keep your questions ready. We'll take a quick round and answer the questions as and when they come. Okay, so what do I mean by the venture? Basically, it could be a software of any sort. It could be a mobile app. It could be a web application, any software product, which I'll be calling in general as a software. So at some point in your career, or some people might not join a company, they would write off after the degree, they would try to start a product of their own, be an entrepreneur. And we see most of the young graduates are interested in that part. So that is why we are trying to show what you should have in mind before you jump in to start creating a product. So the very first question is, why do you make a software? So that seems to be a very simple question when I ask you. So let's look at a few more in detail questions. So if you are trying to give a software solution, and suppose that you do some software as a part of your assignment. So put it in that example. You will be doing many assignments throughout your learning 3 or 4 years, and you put the examples that you gave and the solutions that you gave in each of the incidents, and think about the question that I'm raising here. Do you really believe that a software can be a solution in your case? Because there are certain things, sometimes a software might not be the best solution. For example, there could be certain manual things that are done in a different way, but still it is a manual thing. And we trying to put a software in every single case might not be the best solution in all the cases. So we find that in many projects that we see from the CVs or even throughout the competitions, that the technology is trying to be applied without thinking about the practical use of it. So that's why I want you to seriously ask this question yourself. Do you really believe this software is going to be a solution? And then do you know the end user side of the story? In some cases, we assume the question and we also come up with a solution ourselves. And we are not thinking with the end users who are actually working with it. And by doing so, we fail to see the real issues that they face. So we are trying to force a solution that we assume ourselves would give them the answer. But in the process, we are sometimes changing a problem to something else that they didn't want to have in the first place. So there is then sometimes a resistance from the end users where we have not correctly understood the question or the problem that we are trying to solve. That's why, so why do you make a software is so important to ask all these little questions. And when you start any of these software products, maybe later in your life, of course, it will be done as a business. So no matter what the solution that you are given, unless it is a charity project, you definitely expect money to come as an outcome of that project. That's fine. But is it the only, or this is the primary goal of what you do? The downside of that attitude is you are very much focused on making money, and in doing so, you might forget the problem that you tried to solve. So what I suggest is you first solve a problem one by one and make a solution, and then develop it into a stage where the customers are ready to pay. So the next thing we are going to talk about is how you create value and how you solve problems one by one. So what are the actual problems you are trying to solve? So we even ask these simple questions in interviews, looking at the final year projects or any other assignments that they do. And surprisingly, most of the students or the graduates, they fail to give a good answer. Let's say that you have a very basic inventory control system. Okay. So you might have made an inventory control system for a smaller shop. That's fine, good. So if we ask this question again, what are the problems you are trying to solve? Then if you have not studied the problem, I mean, this is nothing about IT. This is all about how business is done, how the things work in real life. If you don't have that idea in your background, then you really fail to give a good answer. What most students say is, well, we have designed a system. Yes, that is the result. No, the question is, what are you trying to solve? It is all about how the business works and the problems that they solve. And or it could even be a solution that improves something, not that they have a huge issue to be solved, but you are suggesting some solution, and after applying it, you are making profits, or you are increasing the efficiency, or it can be that many different forms. So let's ask some questions. So do you really understand the issues they face currently? So that is where, as I said earlier, you really have to talk to the people who are facing it, or you can even work with them. You can talk to them. Sometimes we might see an IT solution would be the case. For example, I have had some experiences where we try to come up with a good solution, but later on I understand the IT knowledge of the end users is very low. So no matter how advanced we are trying to go, they might not even know how to operate a basic web browser. And what do you call about login, logout, and how the sessions work, or how the password should not be shared, and very basic things. I mean, believe me, there are still enough end users who are not having the same set of IT basic knowledge. So that's why it's really important for you to understand the issues that they face. sometimes there are good solutions and they are using it a different way. For example, I saw once there's a ticketing system and it was a really nicely implemented. They have a large screen and you see the next 10 numbers displayed to be there, and you know a probable time that when you will be called in. But still, there was a huge queue. When I looked at it, the issue was, even though the ticketing system runs in, there's another queue that is handled manually. So someone is overriding the system. So these are real practical issues. And when we look at the reasons, it is also illegal, but they find it to do the old way very easy. They just have a notebook to write the next name and create a queue, and then get people in through that queue, not through the ticketing system. So the people who are going through the ticketing systems are waiting, and seems like the queue is not moving. So similarly, in a country like this, especially where the systems are starting to come into place, where the people are not much used to work through a system, it is very much important, you educate people how to use a system and also see how they can override it and see their side of the story. So just by making a good solution is not a guarantee that it will be a success. Then can they do it better with your solution, or is it just different? So sometimes the solutions that we give, it is changing their problem. We are not exactly giving an answer. We are changing one problem and introducing another problem. And that's when people get really frustrated. Because when you are familiar with the problem, you don't feel like it is a problem anymore. It's just a matter of following it. Maybe there's a huge process to get something done. You write in certain few books and you get some approvals, you get physical signatures, you pass letters, and that's how they operate. And after a few months or so, they just get used to do that. But as a solution, you change it completely. And in the process of doing so, if they find that they have to do a lot of other things, which also takes a lot of other time, they might again come back to their original way of doing things, which is fair enough by their side of the story, because they don't really feel that this is making a change. It is changing only the problem. So it is very much important to show the end users, not only the owners of any business, that the solution that you give and what happens at each stage and where the results are coming in. Sometimes the new process that you include might have many steps, but at a later stage, you might reduce the number of processes by a whole number of steps, and that could be the place where the real result can be measured. So it is important to give the whole picture and then explain how a solution can be practical, and it is not just replacing and giving another problem. I am going through these slides a bit quickly because I want to get to a place where deciding on the business versus the technology, which is the main part of my talk. Then are you introducing additional problems by solving some, like I mentioned here. So this is the main thing that you will have to think when you sit in front with an end user and try to work with them and observe how they use your system without interrupting. Then you get a real world experience on if you make a change or if you have not done a change in the way they work. And does it make their life easy, or does it make any noticeable difference? So yeah, if all these things happen in a positive way, the point I want to get to is, this is where we can say the solution that you give can be monetized or can be charged. This is where the end customer or the ones who is paying for this can be perceived that, okay, with this solution, with all these things that are happening, that this is the value addition I'm giving through that. And that's why we are expecting this much of payments for this product. So without asking the payments upfront, we should first convince the customer or the end user how the value that we deliver is doing a change in their lives. So if you can do that, happy customers are willing to pay you. How is it making a difference? So there are certain ways that you can measure certain things, or there are some ways you can see the type of differences. So let's look at the type of differences I'm talking about. So it could be a time saver. So what that took 1 hour might be taking maybe 45 minutes to 30 minutes. That's definitely time saver. So the point I want to make is, what do you really achieve by each of these outcomes? So if it is a time saver, you are having more freedom, or you could be having less stress, having to complete certain things in a short period of time. Or at the same time, the business could be tricky, where if you try to add more work on that same time, that could also add more stress, but that is a business decision. That is not something that we normally do. But the point I want to make is, always convert the outcome or the thing that you notice, the change you are doing through your solution, into a feeling or into a different change in their lives. So increased income, obviously that is good, that is not brain. So it is improving the living standards of whoever is getting that income. So that's where even Surangi mentioned in the last session how the product Apple is doing a total different way of marketing their products. So I'll come with one example here. Then if you have happy end customers, suppose you are selling or trying to sell a product that has intermediate layer where they serve their own end customers. Because of the, let's say, suppose it's a call center solution, where the end customers would be the actual users of that service. So with this call center solution, with the improved services, and their end users are happy. So it could even be more income, it could be just satisfaction of work, something could be. And this is something that you'll have to think. Remember that not all solutions can be measured. If you can measure, that can be at your advantage by showing numbers. This is what you were, and this is now where you are. You took 1 hour to do this, and now you take 45 minutes to do this. There's a clear monetary value that you can apply with it. If you take the daily salary of an employee, you can easily calculate the savings and convert it to a number of rupees or dollars. That is one way. But not every outcome of a solution can be measured. So sometimes it's a number like the hours saved or the cost saves or the profits increased. Or sometimes it can even be a feeling. So if it makes people happy, if it makes their employees happy, if it makes their end customers happy, that is a feeling. That is not something you will ever be able to measure in any way. You can have some surveys, there are certain methods, but you cannot quantify that value. But that too is an outcome of the solution that you should be giving. then look at this advertisement. When iPod was released long time ago, it is you might not know about it. It is one of the digital music players. At that time, there was no such thing as smartphones. So you might wonder, why do you need an iPod when it can be done with a smartphone? No, there weren't smartphones back then. And all the biggest audio player that they had was at least quite large. So it was heavy and it was not easily used. And then came the iPod. It's a totally new product, and see how they are marketing. They say 100 songs in your pocket. So it is not saying about how many megabytes of storage, what is the processor type, what is the RAM, what are the specifications of the device, nothing. Just 1,000 songs in your pocket. So that is talking about a feeling. The pocket says, by saying it is in your pocket, it has told the size of it. It is not saying about in centimeters. It just says you can have it in your pocket and it is mobile. So all the things are said in a single word and 1,000 songs. You don't have to be really specific. You can even say 1,024 megabytes. Who cares megabytes? And how many people would understand that? No, we are talking about general people who are just listening to music. They are not IT people to count the megabytes. So there's a difference in way things are marketed. And as mentioned earlier, that's one thing. If you can read up about how Steve Jobs did marketing, it is not only the products are so great, but it is the way that he marketed and converted the solutions that they gave through the products into a feeling so that people would go after and buy the products. So it is very important to see the thinking behind that. So if you have some time, there are documentaries on his life. His biography book has also been released. It has a lot of details on the little bit of things that he decided and why he changed certain things. And also, if you can remember, Surangi was mentioning, Steve Wozniak was the tech guy behind most of his work, but he just knew how to implement things. It is the idea that Steve Jobs gave Steve Wozniak that we want to build something like this. For example, when the very first personal computer that they introduced, which is called Macintosh, and by that time, the personal computer was not in the business. There was nothing much. IBM was there to some extent, but people didn't know of something like a computer. It was not a part of a home. So likewise, one by one, they were introducing products that are not there at all and creating a feeling and a value in the people's lives and convincing them into buy the beautiful products so that they also feel their living standards are uplifted in a certain way. So it is not just they are trying to fool the end customers by giving a false hope. No, they were really talking about what you can get through these products. So applying to your venture, if you can convince the customer by using this is how you are benefiting, and that is the time they will be ready to pay you. So just focus on that. So before you come to the payments, and sometimes when we start new projects, if you start thinking about making money from the day one, you might come into a issue because if you don't know how the value that you deliver makes a difference in their lives, if you have no idea, then you can come up with certain numbers of the charges that you want out of the customers, but you might not be able to convince them why you should pay this much for this. Right. So if we go back to solving little bit of problems, you are not normally implementing or coming up with an idea from A to Z from the very beginning. What normally happens is you see a single problem, you give a solution, and you see a supporting problem that you can solve as well, and you solve that also. One by one, the number of problems that you solve are added together to come up with a big solution. So if you follow a simple pattern like this, identifying any problem, ask what the customer wants, or if you are suggesting something new that they don't have, then design and implement and do a lot of testing and show and get feedback, which is basically what we call as agile concepts, which I put in very simple words, and follow this pattern throughout. Then this is where you get a lot of good feedback and create a solution that is closer to what the customer wants. This is nothing new. You know all of these things very much. The reason why I put this is, I have seen products that are being developed without this step 5 being followed. They keep on developing products. Sometimes they skip step 2 as well. They don't check with the customer's issues. They don't show the solutions. They keep on developing, assume that this is going to be a great product someday, to the point they realize this is not something the customer wanted in the first place. So after a long time, they have invested a lot of time and money to develop something a customer is not willing to pay. So what do you do with it? We've seen such products, either they just go bankrupt or they try to sell it off to someone else at a very low price. There aren't many things that you can do if you haven't done your homework on identify the very initial steps. Right. So this is the main part I want to highlight during my talk. So is it the technology that I should focus on, or is it the solutions or the business solutions that I should focus on when developing something? So apply this with your assignment projects, with your final year projects, or with your entrepreneurial projects, or whatever that you might start in the future. In most cases, you might start a job at a software company. At later stage, you might join a new product, or you might start something on your own. So again, at all these stages, even in daily life, think what you are applying and whether it is a technology that is important or it is a solution. So I just wanted to read this story. I would slowly read. This doesn't have to be a real story. It can be totally made up. That's fine. But I want you to get the essence of it. It's like this. So NASA discovered that ballpoint pens would not work in zero gravity. To combat that problem, NASA scientists spent a decade and $12 billion to develop a pen that writes in zero gravity, upside down, underwater, on almost any surface, including glass, at a temperatures ranging from below freezing to 300 degrees Celsius. So the problem is why you can't hold a pen upwards and keep on writing, because there's no gravity to take the ink upwards. You understand the problem. So you cannot take such a pen out of the space or in the moon or write it. Then what the Russians did, they used a pencil. So the essence of the story is what I want you to take. This could be a total made-up story. I don't care. It is all about coming up with a simple solution. They both understood the problem. They both did their research. One went on applying the highest form of technology to come up with an answer. They spent a lot of time and money, and they did come up with an answer, while the Russians just used a pencil. So that's the exact thing I want you to do when you are trying to apply the technological knowledge that you gain through the degrees to whatever that you do. So when you go for a job interview, when you explain a project, you should be able to explain why you did this, why this technology was used, why it was done this way and not the other. And if the problem changed slightly like this, what you could have done. These are the things that I want you to think yourself. So I'll say a few more examples here. These are real examples that you've seen throughout the CVs, some of the competitions, even startup projects. Once we saw a fingerprint scanning system being used. So it looks cool that they have a fingerprint scanner and then they do some employee registration work. And we were asking, okay, the very first question I was talking, what was the problem you were trying to solve? Well, then he explains about the fingerprint scanning, and then the employees would place their thumb and then they don't have to sign anymore. Okay. Again, we asked the same question. So what he has done through the final year project was integrate a fingerprint scanner into a system. So it is replacing a manual register that they had to physically write and enter. It's fine. There are some work. He's done. That's good. But still, the student has failed to identify how did that solve a problem? How did it make a difference in their lives? We can come up with ways how it made a difference. There could have been a queue where people had to write, and obviously there's a time saving happening with that, and there's also accuracy. And a different person can write on behalf of someone else here, not even when they are not coming to the office, as if they had come. So you can't change that through a fingerprint system. There are so many things that you can do. And the other thing, when we ask, okay, what are the value additions that you did? Because the fingerprint scanner is not something you created. It's taken out of the box. You just integrated it. There are also, the students do not know, or he has not basically added any value. He's just connected things together and given it. So that's where we want you to think as software engineers or QA engineers, or engineer perspective. If you are just a software developer, you would do what you are asked to do. Okay, go and build this, you take it out and you build that. But if you're a software engineer, we expect you to think all these questions and solutions that I was talking about and thoroughly understand the solution that you are giving. Why am I making this? Why should I do this? How can we do it better? Why can't we do it in a simple manner? Likewise, everything. So value addition is a key when you are showing what you can do through your projects. So when you go to interviews to get your job, even show not just the projects. Sometimes the students have a list of projects, but they fail to show anything through one of those projects. Sometimes they have close to 8-10 projects, but asking every single thing, it is something very typical. They haven't added value. They don't know what problems they solved. And if we change the problem slightly, they completely get stuck. So that is an indication that they haven't understood what they were doing. So one more example I can give was, there's a trend now to do IoT devices. And you could be learning a lot of IoT subjects as well. And we clearly see that trend, which is good. Still, we want you to think and apply it. There was one case where there's a medicine tablet dispenser, whereas a patient can press a button and get the number of tablets assigned for him to take on that particular day. So he's created a prototype with it, a project out of it, a sample device with a button, and it has connections electronically, and all sorts of things are there. He's done some work. But simply going back to that pen versus pencil example, there are simple plastic boxes that are just the same. They are 7 days allocated, and even they are divided into sessions within the day. You could simply place the tablets. That can be done once a week by a nurse or someone. Because even for that machine that he's built, someone should input the tablets in the correct numbers. You can get such a plastic box for maybe 200 rupees. Then why would you implement the same and not add any value in a much difficult and a costly way? And how can you market this? And it is also large as well. It is quite large. So not thinking all of these questions well ahead before you start, then you have started going on the wrong track. You can be taking a lot of difficult routes, but you are not getting anywhere. So obviously you gain some experience on integration and working with electronics and IoT devices, that's fine. But that is fine just to get some experience as a hobby project, to try out something, that's fine. But if you are showing it as a project or a product or a competitive thing that you want to compete with the other products, there are serious questions because you didn't ask the correct questions initially. So that's why I say technology is just a tool. And I remember one more case where I saw a web interface. And the interface had really large text. It looks, at a glance, it looks ugly, to the point that if this was the device, there were like at most 3 or 4 lines, so that the text was really large. The first question is, who decided these user interfaces? So because it doesn't look that good, it is not matching the other software that are already out there. But asking the questions and knowing who uses that is, got to know that the end user of that mobile or system, or it is used in a tab actually, a larger 8-inch tab. They are freight operators, they are using large gloves, so they cannot touch if the text was too small. So because of that, they had to design everything to mesh how they can touch and click. Because then the whole interface changes. Then you cannot show a lot of data even if you want it. So there are some things like that that looks quite odd at a glance, but if you think deeply on the requirement, how the solution should be, that makes sense. So these are some of the examples that I could take from the real world, and there are countless things if you go through the series. So to answer some of the questions that was asked earlier, when many of you are asking what we should develop, what should we do to be a data scientist, what should we do to be a software engineer, everything. The question is repeated every time. again, what I say, as we did earlier, was it is attitude helps a lot. Why? The attitude of learning anything, attitude of solving problems should be there throughout your career, not just at the very beginning. Because if that was not the case, if we try to be an expert in one particular technology, when the technology becomes obsolete, when it changes, then where would you go? Still, there's a small percentage of people who are experts in certain technologies. They are highly paid as well. But in general, that is very difficult to predict. You can't say C# as a language would be there forever. No, nothing would stay there. Everything will change. That's all we know. But if you had developed a skill to solve problems and apply the technology skill to give a solution, that will be helpful right throughout your career. So even in my example, why I listed the industries that I worked was started with document management, then into manufacturing, along with distribution. And while working at an ERP, we had to have some knowledge on different domains. We cannot implement a solution while breaking another thing. So likewise, I ended up with healthcare. Now I'm learning healthcare domain from the scratch. It doesn't matter to me because the way that you give solutions, the questions that you ask are still the same. Obviously, there's an advantage of someone having certain technological knowledge or domain knowledge, but if they know only that, they might get stuck with it when the technology or the domain changes. Yes, so that is the main point that I wanted to give you. So find what can be done with technology and know when to use it, because not always you should be using it. Where it can be used, there are places and there will be places you should purposefully skip using it. Carefully choose where to use it and how it creates value. If you can answer all these questions on whatever that you do, starting from your assignment to your final year projects to your entrepreneurial venture, then you have a good enough understanding on what you did. Or you might understand this is going to fail, this is planning to fail. So that is a good input for you to have rather than trying to sell it and go out to the market and then failing there. Yes, so that's basically what I wanted to talk. I think yes, exactly used 40 minutes. Yes. Now it's the Q&A and up to you to ask any questions. You can put it in the chat. Let's see how it goes. You can ask any question. I mean, it is true that we are waiting for the first person to ask something and then everyone will follow. So be the first person.
Hi everyone, so you can unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you have, or you can forward us through the chat.
Yeah. I'll keep the chat here. Come on, guys, it's up to you. That's why I didn't want to make it too long, limited it to 40 minutes and allocated 20 minutes for Q&A. This is not a lecture. No. If you came for the certificate, just forget it. It is not the certificate or anything like that that is the outcome of this. It is what you gain out of these sessions that we all did. If it helped to understand something a little bit better, if it clarified something, that's all what we want. Maybe we should give something for the first question. Irukuri, did you have any questions that were sent earlier before the session? If you have anything ready, we can take it from there.
We have a question right now. Why most of startups get failed at the beginning? What is your opinion?
Yeah, if you can read a book, this book is nothing to do with technology. It's called E-Myth. I'll just type the name here. E-Myth. And you might not believe it was written in 1970s. It is talking about a very simple example of someone starting a bakery and how things try to fail as it goes on. So the same things are still applied, even though we are having so advanced technologies. The way businesses are run are a little bit different, but how you add value, how you can scale up, all the things are still applied. So putting the technological context into the question that I asked, what I see is most of the startups, they have this issue. I'll go back in my slide. The last question is making money your primary goal. Let's put the same question to your jobs. Why do most people start to become a software engineer? Obviously, because it's a high paying job. Then what I've seen is after some time, without the people who just started without much interest, they get really bored with it. They don't have interest anymore to learn anything new, which is a part of their life. And they stagnate in their career and then they go off. Similarly, if the primary goal of the startup was to make money, which should be a result, not the goal, then you might not know what you are trying to solve. Then you might fail to convince the customer how your solution is going to make a change in your life, how it is going to add value in your life. So what we see mostly is the startups, and they either don't understand or do enough research on what is out there. They try to make a copy of, for example, let's say PickMe. PickMe is a good startup that has been successful. So let's make another PickMe. So making another PickMe or another Uber is not going to be successful easily. It can be, but what is the change that you are going to do? How you are going to differentiate yourself from the competition? And what is the pressure from the peer competitors? So there are so many parameters you'll have to think without starting with a project right away. It could be the easier thing to create a software and launch it, but it is very difficult to market it if you cannot convince the value. So think about, if the money making is your primary goal, then there's a huge chance of failing at some point. And see if you can understand the value you are making, if you can convince the customer of how your product is different to the others. And if you can answer all these things, there's a high chance that you can succeed. Still, in the terms of business planning, there's a whole lot of things on how to scale things. So that is why I gave the book called E-Myth to read. It is all about business planning, how a business can be successful, even if you're passionate about it, and how everything can look so good at first. And when it's tried to scale up, then how it can fail. And if there's a team working with it, when everyone is not on the same page, how you are going to resolve the conflicts and how we are going to go together as a team. So if one starts to pull, and the whole boat can sink. So what happens if an idea we are developing is already in the market? How do we proceed? Yeah. Question from Sasi. So there are enough such ideas. For example, if you take WhatsApp, when WhatsApp came to the market, there were enough chat applications. But it picked up with paper. So if we ask the same questions through all of these, there's a way that they differentiate. Maybe not adding too many features was the way that they differentiate. It was a simple chat application that you could send text using a phone. And so you don't need to create a separate login. You just have to have a phone number. It could be very simple. Versus there could be solutions out there which also have the same feature plus 100 more other features, that is making the end users quite complex. So they find it quite difficult to do it. And if there is competition, see how you can differentiate, or see where they are where they are not doing so good. So that is what you are going to pick and maybe give a better or a different solution. So doing the market research and using the competitor solutions could be a good way that you can see how you are going to be different. So I don't suggest to simply copy an idea and get it started. You can go to some extent, but on the long run, it is quite difficult to do so. Did I answer the question? So you can unmute and talk back. That I would really suggest you to talk without sending it in the chat. Having human interaction is much better. You can ask anything. Surangi is also there. And I'll just fill in with the timer. If you remember, Skype did some user interface updates, because all this time Skype was very popular to be a very simple chat application. And then they decided, okay, we'll make it much better by including many fancy features, which they destroyed their own simplicity and made it too fancy. So there are certain things that you can learn from it. Even the big companies do that kind of work. There's another questions.
You all remember Yahoo?
Maybe they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are pre-Google. You are from a generation that cannot remember. But Yahoo was the most successful search engine before Google, and Google just did a simple thing. They changed the interface. If at that point, if you were a Yahoo user, it was inundated with news, all sorts of widgets on their screen, and Google just came and put one text box and one button. And it changed the way people looked at. Of course, they had a great algorithm which gave really, really accurate results. They, over the years, they've evolved and grown. But pivoting is something that, like Janaka said, think of something new. Yes, you can, there are ways that you can improve ideas, but the most expensive thing in a business is marketing. So there are two ways to sell. One is to convince people to buy something completely new, or otherwise sell to a set of people who are already convinced that they want it. What do you think is easier? As a startup, not knowing where you're pitching yourself, whether you have to, when you have to convince a whole set, and when you create a market segment, say if you target the whole population of China, there are many companies who failed marketing to China because they simply don't have the budget. So they have a great idea and they did a social media campaign for a month and went through all their marketing budget. So it is critical that you understand your audience, and fine-tune your market segment, and find whether it is better to actually introduce a fresh idea and whether you have the capacity to do that, because that will require a lot more money than if you've identified your target market very carefully and they know and they're looking for a solution. Often they already have it. They're like, oh, I want something like this, right? And then it is a matter of promoting that, and you still spend money. But to what Janaka said before, is making money your primary goal? If you're going to do business, that is your only goal, because that goal is what will sustain any other things. Should you want to improve HR for your company? Should you want to improve tech for your company? If your bottom line is red, you can't do any of that. So your primary goal is to make money as a business, right? So don't forget that when you're pitching an idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So just to add on that, not trying to make money is not what I meant. So in case that the students got a different idea, so you can't anyway sustain a business without making money, as Surangi correctly said. So have it in your mind how to make money, but if you are not trying to give a good solution or create value, then if you're thinking only about your business results, then it could be really difficult to market. And do we have a question?
Sorry, Janaka, yes. I wasn't sure if I was clarifying the right thing. I just wanted to.
Yeah, okay. It's okay. There's a question, what are the things we need to consider when developing an idea to a problem using a software? Well, that was basically what I was talking. I cannot give a short answer to that. So if I simply run through what I was showing here, first, if the software can be a solution, because not all solutions should be a software-based solution, and find out about the problem and so on. So, and also follow the other questions that I was raising. I cannot give a quick answer to this. So it was based on all the slides that I was giving. And there could be students who are interested in some startup ideas, and most of them think whether should I take a day job or work within a software company, or should I start with my own startup? With my experience, what I would say is you can join a software company, have your financial stability to some extent. So you have an income already, you don't have to worry too much about it, and then use the additional time, as Surangi earlier mentioned, in the early stages of your career, when you don't have too much of a burden, then you can use that financial stability and the amount of more time that you have to work on your startup. And when you are gaining experience through the job that you do, you will realize how the teamwork happens, what is needed by the end users, how you can pitch things, and how you should talk to different roles in a different manner. For example, explaining the same question to a manager and an end user and a developer could be totally different. You don't talk out using the same language. So everything will be a part of your business. So with that experience, I would say you can launch gradually, then trying to launch something right off your degree, but it's up to you. There are some students who have figured it out pretty well. So I cannot say don't do it. That is very generic answer. Surangi, do you think, what do you think on that, on starting up with a startup right of the degree?
Well, it's like this. I think as humans, we are most risk takers when you're younger, and rightly so, because your responsibilities increase exponentially depending on the life choices you make. Now, saying that, there is much value in having some understanding of how business works, and that can only be had through experience in working with others. So there's a I can't remember who it was, but he was talking about how creators and operators need to get together for an idea to actually work. But most often what happens is, when you are an entrepreneur, you tend to gel well with other creatives who have creative ideas. But all of you creatives will come up with the most brilliant idea, and then someone has to do the financials, monitor cash flow, recruit people, and run a business. So that is an operations job. So if you are going to start out, when you're teaming up, and you can never do it alone, I would suggest that you look for someone who is very good at doing, who is happy to do the day-to-day. There are people, personalities are different, and you work well when you identify your role and you give it the best. So if you're the one, if you're the visionary, then you need to find someone who can add 100 more pods to this idea this year. You can add 20, and we will be sustainable for 3 years. So you need you need a group of people, and you need a soundboard. So always have people who have gone before you on this journey, people who are older, who can advise you, because they may not have your idea, but they have failed so many times, they will tell you when you're turning the corner, they were going to run into a wall, right? So that's my advice. Of course, take chances. I took chances. I have always been an entrepreneur. I've tried many different things, creative, technology, and it is a privilege to be able to do that. So don't take that lightly. Not everyone has the opportunity to take that chance.
Yeah. And Surangi mentioned a very important point on the different types of work that you have to do in a business to make it running. So you could be really passionate about something, but still someone has to do the accounts, someone has to handle HR, handle the employees, day-to-day work. So everything is a part of the business. So that is something that is talked on the book that I gave called E-Myth. So it simply explains how everything comes into play. And when one fails, the whole thing can collapse.
Very good at that.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions, Sirupa? I think we are reaching the time. Okay, I think we have taken 1 hour. If there are any final questions, we can take and wind up.
Guys, if you have any questions to ask from the professionals at Creative Software, now it's your chance. Well, I think we can wind off for the day. A very big thanks to Mr. Janaka and Surangi Madam for sharing your expertise with us. Hopefully you all gain some valuable insights and knowledge. And thank you once again for joining with us. I bid you all a good night for today.